All right, good morning. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, on behalf of the Jasper Chamber, I'd like to welcome everyone here this morning. What a great day. It's like a heat wave outside, so we can all enjoy this today as we slide around tomorrow, probably. But I'd like to thank everyone for being here. This is an annual event that the Chamber has put on many years, even before I've been with the Chamber, and that's already been a few years. But we do this so that you can meet your state legislators. You can get to know who they are. They are common people, just like you and I are, and they do this as part of their job, but they also have other jobs that they do, just like we do. So we do want to thank everyone for being here today. There are some snacks up there at the end. If you feel free to get up and get something, go ahead and do that. And we'd also like to thank Vincennes University Jasper for allowing us to use this room, and the local media for being here. They're very good at always covering this event. And usually, and I believe on the TV 18, they will be replaying this at some point in the very near future. So why don't we all stand right now and have the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I did want to explain the format. We will be doing Q&A, but we will be asking that you write your question down and then pass them forward, and then I will read those toward the end of the event, and the legislators will then answer those questions to the best of their ability. So there are papers and pens on the end of each row. If you run out of those, let me know. I have extras. So now I would like to introduce our legislators. We have State Representatives Shane Lindauer and Steve Bartels, and our newest State Senator Daryl Schmitt. So we thank them for being here, and they all represent Du Bois County within their districts. The way we'll start, I guess we'll start with Daryl, and because he's the new one, so we'll kind of put him on the spot. And I've asked him this morning if he would tell us a little bit about what it's like to be in the state legislature and what his experience has been so far, and really kind of starting as a new person, what is the experience and what is the process that he's gone through. Then they will each also pass the microphone, and they'll tell about some of the bills that they are part of, some of the bills that they will be introducing or have already introduced, and then we'll just kind of keep the morning flowing. So, Daryl, I'm not sure if that's on. I'm going to turn mine off.
Hello? Is it on? All right, awesome. Well, welcome everyone. My name is Daryl Schmitt. Started out here in local government. I was a part of the county council. I am a farmer down west of Ireland. Been farming for the last 30 years down there on fifth generation family farm. After college, I was in UPS for a number of years until my mother died of breast cancer at 50, and then came back and been farming ever since. And really passionate, care about the community. So a couple of years ago, I got involved at the county level on the Du Bois County Council. Enjoyed that experience, and then last September, I was sworn in to replace Mark Messmer in Senate District 48, which is Gibson, Pike, Du Bois, Spencer, Perry, and Crawford counties. So now, fast forward, started in the General Assembly here. We're in the second week of session. First week mainly ceremonial. This week, it got intense real fast. So excited to be there and excited to do it. A lot of things to learn, a lot of things going on. I would say it's early in the process, so a lot of things as we see now could potentially be changing down the road. Some of the priorities there on the Senate side, basically the top priorities for this session are Senate Bills 1 through 5. Okay, there are, Nancy, did you put those handouts in the back? I did. Okay, so there are handouts. If you don't have them on your way out, you can grab one. Senate Bill 1, enacting meaningful property tax reform. 2, contain Medicaid costs, lower health care costs, responsibly managing our water resources. And number 5, ensuring fiscal integrity and contract accountability. As I was going through the process last summer, when a potential that Mark was going to be, running for Congress and potentially winning Congress, my priorities, I am from the local government. I'm from Southern Indiana. I've lived here my entire life. My priority is always to drive decisions local. I think at the local level, we can make the most prudent and responsible decisions because we're involved. It's affecting us. It's affecting, who we are and our children. So that's always the basis of what I talked about all summer, and I believe that. And then also, for those of you that were involved last summer, I always talk about accountability, and efficiency, in our governmental agencies. And those things are tackled in the first 5 Senate bills. Basically, the Senate bill number 1, that will be, that basically at this point mirrors Governor Braun's priorities as far as property tax, okay? Will that bill look the same when it gets down to the end of the road? Very possibly no. Probably no. Will we be able to recognize it? Could be. We will have to balance the local needs versus, the property tax reform. Nobody wants higher taxes, right? As a resident of Indiana, we have one of the lowest levels of property taxes as compared to other states in the country. Okay, but having said that, and for a number of reasons, inflation and a number of reasons, our actual dollars that we've been paying have went through the roof, right? Everybody can see that on your property tax bills, 25% year-over-year increases. So it will be a priority of mine. We have to find the balance, okay? Everyone's clamoring for property tax relief, but we also have to fund our local government, All the property taxes that we use, that's what funds our airports, that's what funds our facilities, in our schools. And I didn't realize this until getting involved, that property taxes are what funds the basic buildings, facilities of our schools. Then the part of the money that the General Assembly in Indianapolis and the general fund kicks in, that's what funds teacher salaries, and other things. So we will definitely, we have to work to find a balance on those. Containing Medicaid costs and preventing fraud, that's number 2. There's room for improvement in there. We have a lot of people at risk, at need, that we do need to help. But we're going to have to find a balance. The priority is to kind of eliminate fraud. There's also people that are abusing the system. So those are things to look at on that. And then the health care cost, on Senate Bill number 3, there's a lot of things, the way that's working with the intermediaries that are administering. There's things there that we need to look at. And I know everyone was probably aware up in northern Indiana, Indiana Economic Development Commission worked on big projects. They were working to potentially move pipe water resources from one water basin to another, which, when you're messing with Mother Nature and moving things from one watershed to the other, there's potential problems. So Senate Bill 4 will be working on creating some safeguards there so we don't have unintended consequences. We're fortunate at this point with our water resources in Indiana, but we have to make sure and manage those appropriately. You get in other states where water is an issue, there's legal battles, and all people do is concentrate on water law in other states. So those are things that we're trying to watch there. Senate Bill number 5 is fiscal integrity and contract accountability. That goes back to one of my other tenets of accountability and efficiency in local government. I believe in elected officials having accountability, being held accountable, and holding other functions in state government, federal government, local government accountable. If we've got unelected positions, they're not necessarily accountable. Now, having said it, there's a bunch of awesome people in our departments, in our agencies at the state level. But some of these will be controls on when contracts are being awarded, accountability to make sure we're going through proper bidding procedures, just trying to create efficiencies, in those functions. So, and then also the one thing I might add is that the one other handout is concerns Senate Bill 146. Education is a priority. As I've been going over the last couple years talking to people, it seems like everybody's mad. Parents are mad, teachers are mad, administration's mad. I don't know, maybe mad's not the right word, but everybody is concerned. And you can ask these gentlemen, the state legislature is concerned as well. There's a lot of dollars being thrown at it. And everybody's concerned about the results. That's what all four groups I mentioned, everybody's concerned about the same thing. So there's a bunch of things that are happening in Senate Bill 146 as it stands currently, raising minimum salaries of beginning teachers, making $45,000 a minimum, bringing it from 40 up to 45,000. And monies that come from the state that provide teacher salaries, there's a minimum of 62% of that is has been in previous times earmarked specifically that has to be used by local school districts for teachers. Okay, that minimum will be raised to 65%, and then there's some other things in the bill as well. So, but those are kind of, I guess, the basic priorities. And I don't know did I get too long-winded on that? Okay. I've sat over there right by Sandy and Amy's, where I've always sat all the times before, so it's a little bit different being on this end of it. But those are the things that I've learned so far. So those are all the things that I've kind of uncovered in being on the county council for a couple years and my immense 4 months of experience in the state legislature. So I'm sure there'll be time for questions. So I've talked long enough. Thank you.
Okay, sounds good. Steve Bartels, State Representative for pretty much 50% of Du Bois County. I've been chairman for 2 years, and my second year as chairman of Homeland Security, Public Safety, and Veterans Affairs. So as you become a chairman, like Shane and myself, you start finding yourself doing more and more bills in your wheelhouse, whether you want to or not. But typically, I've got 22 years in the military, 7 years as a Terre Haute city cop. Local government, county council in Crawford County ended my career there as the president. So I've got some local experience, and besides dressing up, I really like this job that you've elected me to do. So some of my priorities this year is, like the senator said, they're going to be probably raising the percentage that has to be spent on teachers' salaries to 65. I have a bill that actually now allows the corporations to use any pay for social workers, psychologists, mental health, or any contracts that support that would be part of that 65%. Currently, right now, it's not there. And make sure I talk to ISTA and other folks, and they recognize it's not going to hurt them. And most teachers want this. They want to say, hey, look, we want to encourage corporations to have these folks in there that are trained, not just to help with the teaching and the students, but they're starting to help families in the schools. So very important that they get some credit for that kind of stuff. So you've probably seen on Facebook the National Guard bill that we just passed out of the House. The big thing about that is I was a National Guard member also, and we used to be 4th per capita in the nation, and we're slipping down to 9. Recruiting and retention is hard. There's a couple of reasons. One, if you are ordered to state active duty, you basically don't really have the same benefits as a state employee or anything else. So you can kind of read that bill, but it makes them a state employee when they're on active duty, and it just kind of protects them and their family with some death benefits and also workman's comp. The big thing about that bill is we're seeing a lot in its effects of Vincennes University. When somebody qualifies for the Century 21 grant, they're not able to use the National Guard supplement grant. This would allow them to do that for their extra expenses for like room and board, but like here at VUJC, some other expenses that doesn't just go to room and board. So you see a little tweak to that bill coming up on the House floor that anything that's approved by the Commission for Higher Education, the money can be used for. So I think that's going to help because a lot of people, once they got to Century 21, they're not interested in the Guard because, you know, fairness, we all kind of probably joined the military because we're patriotic, but we also need to pay for something for some reason. I think you guys have followed me long enough that generally I'm always trying to reduce government, make it more efficient. And I'm always going to have one or two bills that do that. So this year my bill is going to move the state chemist from Purdue University back under state control, whether we do it in a Department of Ag or Small Commerce or something. But that's going to be moved back. The intent is transparency and being able to be accountable to the employees and actually know their schedule, know their budget. So we're not asking a third party for this information. And it brings it back under state controls where, I mean, we're one of the only states that has that kind of thing. So it's nothing against Purdue, it's just like it's the right thing to do, bring it back in. And start looking at, we're gonna probably also merge some of their boards and commissions to make it more efficient. So this is, I've been working, this bill blew up in the last 3 days. It's 1186, it's a law enforcement bill, and most of the bill is fine. The first part of the bill is we're trying to fix a problem. The problem is when you have a town marshal, a reserve, or special deputy, sometimes they're operating outside their jurisdiction, and the training is similar to some degree, but the follow-up is questionable. And I've always believed as a law enforcement officer, I want people to help me. I want nothing against those folks, but there are some policy changes that are happening within departments. And therefore, what I want to do, my intent is to have an MOU to where if I'm going to operate outside of DuBois County as a special deputy, that the sheriff has to have an understanding with the next sheriff says, hey, this guy, he's a good guy. And they say, yeah, that's fine. He can enforce laws. But here's maybe our pursuit policy. Maybe here's some issues on this that, when you come to our county, make sure they kind of have that understanding. So the intent is only to make it more efficient. What we have been seeing is towns have 39 deputized marshals, and they go through a 40-hour course, and then they go do security for Indianapolis and outside surrounding areas, and it's starting to cause a problem. So we're just trying to get ahead of a potential big problem. 1235 is another military bill. It's almost the same words as last year. We didn't get it through the Senate. It modernizes the code, so our code, so it matches federal codes, like adding the Space Force, which is now an armed service. I think some of the big things that we're going to be able to allow a little more leeway when it comes to the veterans home. We still got about 100 open beds there. So one of the things we're going to do is say, hey, look, if you move here as a veteran and need to go to the veterans home, you just have to claim residency within the first 6 months. Right now, you can't even apply for a year. So we're going to kind of do those things. There's a couple other things like the definition of eligible person and primary caregiver. All that does is if I live with a veteran, I'm taking care of them every day, that there'll be some changes in the wording so I can get grants to help the veteran. And there's parameters there, but it's cheaper for us to do a grant to help somebody than to put them in the veterans home or put them in a hospital. So we're trying to say, hey, let's have these family members that are really caring for this veteran get something to help with that. Increase the veterans burial death benefit from the county. 1637 is a big one. I started this on months and months ago. This is in line with the governor's new agenda for the Office of School Safety. So I've established that bill, going to be carrying that bill. The greatest thing about this is we're not increasing government. I always try to look at this when the governor mentioned this in his publications. I said, okay, how do I help him get a win? Because I know this is going to be in my wheelhouse. So what we're doing is we're actually dissolving a little bit of a board in the Department of Education and combining them with another board that's already existing in Homeland Security. There's already a full-time member for that board. So we're just changing the duties and responsibilities and basically adding that. So it's technically going to decrease a little bit of the government, make it more efficient. So now everything that has to do with school safety will be under one roof, one person, and a board that can kind of, a bunch of smart people that we can kind of move forward on some of those things. 1638, that is the boards and commission bill. So a lot of that wording was last year in 1396. The intent was to put the bill out there, get this conversation going so they know what's coming. Don't like to surprise anybody, especially agencies and people, but you can look through there. There's a whole list where I'm removing the governor's appointees from local boards. For example, I'm the governor's appointee on Region 15. Love it, love going there, but it's just one more added bureaucracy. So in talking to the last administration, this administration, you're going to see a lot of governor's appointees removed from local boards. There's really not a lot of input. There's not a lot of things that we can do to change what the board's decisions are. It's almost like a reporting, hey, what's going on? We can do that through a memo or an email, so there's no reason to do that. And I've never taken the per diem for miles and stuff, but it's another cost savings measure. So you're going to see some issues with Integrated Public Safety Commission and 911 board going to be merging. They do there's some of the same people on the boards. They do some of the same jobs. So we're just saying, you look there, several commissions are going to be merged into one, and still do the jobs of both. This is one that's interesting, and I've been helping one of our representatives. Is 1044 is the I always say. Now, I mean, this is going to be on TV, but I always say liquefaction of human remains. And he said, no, you can't say that. It's the dissolution of. And so basically there's been a process in other states they've approved where I can't say it, they liquefy bodies, right? And I'm thinking it's been illegal because, I don't know, nobody knows why nobody will pass it. But it's just another way to dispose of your loved ones other than cremation. So it's going to be interesting to see how that works. I like to do a couple weird controversial bills to keep people talking. 1119, this is huge. This is what I've been worked on for probably 5 years now, and it's basically a standard for OWI when it comes to THC. And I'm also on the bill for legalizing and or making medical cannabis legal. So it's going to happen. We know it's going to happen. When, we don't know. But the first step is to actually say, what is the criteria for operating a motor vehicle while intoxicated? So the chairwoman of Courts and Criminal Codes, we've been working on this, I've been 5 years, she's probably the last couple of years. She's agreed to author the bill and then work on it. So what you're going to see is hopefully some indication, a quantifiable measurement of 5 nanograms of THC to be actually operating when intoxicated. So hopefully we get some movement on that. And in testimony in Courts and Criminal Code, which I'm also on, the prosecutors admitted, and we know this, there's people have gone to jail and have been convicted of OWI because they've had CBD in them, if you have any of it, technically. So this kind of just protects the citizens from undue and actually unsubstantiated arrest or conviction. So 1245 is a friend of ours, Dave Hall's bill. It basically takes $1 out of each park pass, park entrance fees, and gives back to the local. A lot of these, my communities, have a lot of state and federal grants, so they're really not getting tax base out of it. But they do have to fix the roads. They still have to provide EMS service, and most of the time they're providing law enforcement and fire services there also. So there's really no compensation except for basically the harvesting of trees, and they only get a percentage of that. So it's just something how to give back to the locals that are actually incurring those costs. 1454, I'm sure if we have any county elected officials in here, would be very interested in this. We're trying to figure out who is responsible for EMS service in each county across the state. We're seeing there's gaps in EMS service throughout the state in many counties, and so we're looking at doing a study. We've kind of got people providing information to find out what we need to do as a state to help facilitate making sure there's no underserved areas when it comes to EMS services. So I'll be watching that bill. And I already talked about the cannabis and stuff. So, and then the last big one that probably that I went to the volunteer fire department's meeting the other night, 1233, which is we've got to come to grips with this at some point in time. Let's go back to this. This is one thing that Democrats and Republicans have agreed on since 2007, is that the township government is probably not the most efficient. And so we've all agreed that somehow that needs to be fixed or changed. So there's been several attempts. We're going to see several more. But I can assure you that it was put out that the state government wants to get rid of volunteer fire departments, and we want everything to be paid firefighters. That's absolutely untrue. Absolutely not true. We recognize the value. I think it's over $4 billion that the volunteer fire department saves us as taxpayers. We recognize it. We want to continue it, but more importantly, we want to enhance it. So I think that that bill needs some work, but it's a conversation. I tell people, don't get too worked up. Very rarely does a bill come out of publication and ends up the way it is. And so a lot of these are conversation starters, just like I talked about boards and commission. I put the bill out there a year in advance so people can talk about it, so we can have time to digest it. So, but just watch that. There's no intent to get rid of volunteer fire departments, and actually we're trying to figure out how to save money for the local units of government so they can spend it more on volunteer firefighters. We don't want them to have fish fries just to make it. So those kind of things that we're trying to do. So I've got cards up here. I tell everybody that my cell phone's on it. Go to me direct. The only time I ask you to go to staff is if we're actually going to work on something where I'm going to have to take legislative matters. Then I start doing a paper trail. But call me direct. I don't have you call my staff. So thank you.
Thank you all for coming. Thank Nancy and Jasper Chamber for putting this on. Appreciate you all being here on a rainy, cold, nasty day. My name is Shane Lindauer. I represent House District 63, which encompasses portions of, as Steve said, Du Bois, Davies, Pike, and pretty much all of Martin County now at this point. Actually, Steve and I both came in kind of midstream into the legislature in 2017, November of 2017. I replaced now Governor Braun. Got to get used to saying that. So this is our 8th session, which is crazy, hard to believe at this point that this is our 8th session. Doesn't feel like it's been that long, but it has. So I am chair of Natural Resources, Department of Natural Resources committee, and I'm also on Roads and Transportation Committee. So those are the 2 committees that I am on. Like I said, chair of Natural Resources. With that, if you're chairman, you typically carry the agency bill. Every year there's some agency cleanup, right, in the code that deals specifically with Department of Natural Resources. So this year I've got that bill. It's House Bill 1616. That's fairly innocuous. I generally, just so you know, stay, kind of just fairly high level on the bills. I've got 9 bills that I'm authoring. I've got, I don't even know, it's 5 or 6 here that I am co-authoring this session, so I'll stay pretty high level. If you guys have questions, then afterwards you feel free to fire away on those. I've got House Bill 1617, which is a Parents' Bill of Rights bill. It's modeled after a bill that Tennessee passed. The Senate has got a bill that's moving through committee that's very similar to this bill. I'm not sure how that's going to play, how my House Bill 1617 is going to play with that bill. We'll see how it goes. But really the biggest points on the bill are trying to make sure that parents have access and are not stonewalled with any kind of medical information that's happening. We've seen, this has happened in Indiana, where a child was taken from a home because the family didn't agree with, the kid wanted to be a boy instead of a girl, or vice versa, and the kid was taken out of the home from the parents. Reunification never happened until the kid became 18, was emancipated. So one thing I hear with DCS, get a little off track here, I guess, but I hear one of 2 things with DCS. They're either incredibly heavy-handed and come in and kind of overstep on what seemed like good parents, and this I think was that case, or you've got the opposite. I've got several friends in the foster care system. They're foster families rather, and we've all heard those stories, right, where you get children who are in really bad situations, and the state has a reunification policy. It's reunification first, which generally I think that's a great policy to take. Obviously there are exceptions to those rules, and so trying to strike that balance in there is difficult. I mean, that space, I was on that committee for a few years, and that is a difficult committee to be on because there are just no good answers, and throwing money at it frankly just doesn't really work. So it's a tough space to be in, but the parent, House Bill 1617 is trying to strike that balance a little bit in there. So House Bill 1611, I'm not going in any particular order here, as you might notice here, but it's got quite a bit of attention. I'll have people throwing stuff at me on this one probably, but it's a daylight savings time exemption. So it is silent on time zone. So if you're in Central Time now, you would stay in Central Time. If you're on Eastern Time, you'll stay on Eastern Time. So it doesn't impact that. It would just say that we are going to stay in Standard Time. So there would be no changing of the clocks. As you probably know, there are other states that do this already. So, and we did at one point, for those of us who are old enough, we did this locally, and it was not a catastrophic event that threw us off. So I've had people say, well, I like daylight savings time. As a state, we cannot do that. For whatever reason, the federal government has said that you can't just stay on daylight savings time without the without the federal government interacting with that or passing legislation to do that. We can, however, just stay on standard time, if I'm making sense here. So why that is at the federal government, I have no idea, but there's obviously more than one time the government, state, federal, or whatever has not made a lot of sense. So this is one of those. So I've gotten quite a few folks reach out on that from all over the place. That's been an interesting concept. I don't know where we're going to go. I've talked to the chairman of the committee a little bit. I'm not certain we're gonna get any movement on that, but you know, right, right. I mean, it makes sense to me. I mean, if you personally, I would seriously like to see this bill move. I think what it does to our biological clocks on the spring forward, the fall back, it does not make any sense to me. And as I've researched it, why we do this, I don't really have any good reasons. Perhaps there was a reason. I know that it goes back to, you know, World War I and some of these other things as far as saving resources, and I've read different reasons for why we do this. I don't know that any of them are good or applicable to today. So in any case, that's where we're at there. There's another bill that actually worked with the governor's office as well as House Bill 1612. It's called the Rural Growth Act. Basically, it sets up a tax credit for investments for small businesses. So one thing that I know Steve and I have talked about in the House has talked about quite a bit is the IEDC. It's Indiana Economic Development Corporation, which is kind of our statewide, you know, development of trying to bring in companies and things. I personally, I don't want to speak for these gentlemen, feel like they've put a large emphasis on just, you know, these huge wins, right? Bringing in these giant companies at the expense sometimes of rural Indiana or small businesses, which small businesses have been the backbone of our nation and our state. And so what this will do will focus on small businesses, and it'll be a tax credit that will go out. I'm sorry, a grant that will go out to small businesses. It'll be administered through IEDC for businesses that want to scale up. Small businesses want to scale up. So it's not for a new business to start, but it is for a scale up of an existing business. So that's something that I'm working on. House Bill 1613 is a background checks deals with background checks specifically for in some cases churches or anybody that's working with kids, anybody that's working with minors. And so there are instances where churches or other groups outside of schools cannot get at all the information that someone who's going to be working with kids, minors, can't get to when they were a minor, when they were a youth, right? Some of those records are sealed. And so you maybe miss out on some, improprieties, to say the least, to some of these kids that you're hiring, or some of these employees that you're going to be hiring that will be working directly with kids. So we're trying to do this responsibly, where a church, we're trying to open this up a little bit to our church or other daycare centers and things like that can have a better access to the underage record of somebody who's going to be coming in and working with minors in youth, health or youth situations, daycare situations, babysitting situations, that kind of thing. And again, there's a fine line there, right? We recognize that in youth, we all make dumb mistakes, right? But I've kind of taken a position on this that I would rather, a church or daycare or whatever have at least access to that information. Then they can make a better informed decision if they want to go through with that hiring process. So the goal of the bill obviously is to protect our kids, protect the minors. So House Bill 1614 is a bill I had last year. This year it's cleaned up. I think it's a much better bill. But it basically deals with, if anybody follows the CBDC, central bank digital currency, this bill I think is a good hedge of protection against that. But it basically utilizes, I won't get in all the details because I know this is kind of a niche area. I'm happy to answer any questions or talk with anyone afterwards. But basically it would allow Indiana to hold gold and silver and then use basically a debit card. So if I put $1,000 of gold somewhere, it's hard for me to go to Walmart, everybody knows, and buy a gallon of milk with my gold, right? This would allow us to have a gold on deposit or silver on deposit somewhere, and then I have like a debit card where I can go to Walmart and buy my gallon of milk for whatever it costs these days, $6 or $7, $6, and that comes out of that. And so I'm using my actual gold to do that, and it's fractionalized at that point. So I think it's a pretty neat idea. There's several states working on it. Texas, Utah's working on it. Oklahoma's working on it. Florida's working on it. There's a lot of states working on it. Nobody's passed it yet, so that's something that the chairman of that committee is actually very open to the idea. I think it's going to be, frankly, a work in progress, that bill. We'll have to continue to kind of work on that. It's a new concept. It's a new idea. Like I said, no other states passed it, so we'll probably continue working on that. Excuse me. House Bill 1615 deals with Crane. Well, I'm sorry. It does two things. It deals with our military installations. I say Crane because I represent the district that has Crane in it, but I've got to be careful because it's not just Crane. It's any military installation in Indiana. So this would be Atterbury, Muscatatuck, Terre Haute, help me, Steve. There's others, but any military installation, Grissom, that needs some infrastructure improvement. So this would contribute money from the state, and before anybody asks, I know that that is typically a DOD responsibility. The federal government would typically be responsible for that. However, we have seen, I think it's 7 other states that have contributed to their military installations, their military assets. And the goal here is to reduce the possibility, so when a BRAC comes up, a base realignment and closure, that the Department of Defense and the federal government, when they look at that, they're going to say, well, Indiana is committed to the military installation. So the goal would be to help mitigate the possibility that a BRAC is going to happen to one of our installations, which, again, going back to Crane, we know what an asset that is for our area, for our region, specifically Martin, Davies, definitely Du Bois, and maybe to a lesser extent Pike, but certainly a big asset. And then, so that's the first part of the bill. The second part of the bill deals specifically with tech parks and Westgate. And it just, so the state typically gives money. There's different levels of tech park. This would basically increase, create a new level of tech park that would allow the state to put more money in their investment, they being Westgate, to try to, they're doing a lot of important research and development and things there as well. So kind of a two-part bill there. 1618, I'm sorry, House Bill 1618 is state fruit. Indiana doesn't have a state fruit, who knew, right? So I know this one gets a lot of chuckles, and I understand why, but so this idea actually came from a 4th grade class here in Jasper. They, in 4th grade, studied Indiana history and would work a lot on civics and things like that. And so one young lady in the 4th grade class here locally recognized that Indiana doesn't have a state fruit. So they've taken it upon themselves to try to get the persimmon as the state fruit. And so, my belief is that if we can foster that civic engagement and encourage that civic engagement, that's something that I want to be a part of. So we were able to get a bill in kind of last minute, and we may talk to the chairman, Doug Miller. I think he may actually hear the bill, and Senator Schmitt and I think, are going to go to the class and talk a little bit about the process, and then they've got a presentation and a PowerPoint and the whole 9 yards. So I know we're pretty excited about that, and hopefully we can get a few of them to come up and maybe even testify at the State House. So again, there are some people who I've heard that they go, well, that's a waste of time. Why are you doing that? I don't think it's a waste of time to foster that civic engagement. So anyway, that's the state fruit of the persimmon. Keep an eye on that one. And then several, like I said, that I'm a co-author on. When you co-author a bill, just so you know, there's different levels of engagement, different levels of input. Some you can be very active on, others not as much, but it's definitely a way to show your support. Like Steve, I've been co-author on medical marijuana this year and several years in the past, not recreational, but medical. There's a bill that I'm actually pretty excited about from a new representative out of Indianapolis on that I'm co-author on farm and home-based business. So if you've got a small hobby farm and you want to sell things out of your barn, we're trying to ease restrictions, ease regulations so that can happen, and let the consumer make their own choice if you want to go and purchase goods, purchase meats and things. Now there's the restrictions. It's not the Wild West. I mean, there are still going to be some some regulations. We're not going to be able to cut everything out of it. Well, I almost said unfortunately. I'm probably more on the Wild West side of things on that, but we're not going to get everything we want there as far as rolling back the regulations, all that kind of stuff. But we're hoping to allow to free up that space a little bit. So let's see if there's anything else I want to talk about. There's I've not worked on this bill yet, but House bill, obviously it's a budget year. That's going to be, that dominates and kind of over, looms over everything because everything is funneled through the budget at the end of the day. So that's something that, the folks on Ways and Means on the House side have got their hands full with. I do not envy them being on that committee. It's, there's a lot of good causes. There's a lot of good asks out there. At the end of the day, you've got to say no, or you've got to say not that much to a lot of people. And so, like I said, that's part of their job. That's why they're on the committee. So that's going to be a big one. And then House Bill 1002, we've got, I think, 8 agenda bills coming out of the House. And House Bill 1002 is an education deregulation bill. And it's a huge bill. Again, I haven't worked on this one directly. It's a very large bill that just rolls back a ton of regulation in the education world. And so over the years, a lot of, I think well-meaning most of the time, ideas come into play that, in K through 12 education, really in everything. It's not just in education. But at the end of the day, you get a mountain of regulation that's on schools or whatever space that this may be. And so this bill seeks to kind of roll some of that back in a responsible manner. So we'll see how that bill ends up. But I think, as Steve said, deregulation, I'm typically a big fan of deregulation. So anytime we can do some deregulation, I get pretty excited about it. So looking forward to seeing how that bill plays out. So, yeah. Thank you.
All right, does anyone have any questions? Okay, we can pick some up. We'll just start with these 2 questions here, then put your other questions toward the middle, and then we'll collect them. So here's a question, Mr. Lindauer. I'm curious as to the statute of the committee, pardon me here, working on the farm drainage maintenance issue. Did I say that right? Okay. I'll just
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure I understand the question. The status of the committee working on the farm drainage maintenance issue. So right now, this session, I mean, whoever asked the question is probably aware of the history we've had with this issue. There's nothing this session that I've seen as far as directly impacting the drainage issue as we go around through this session. Last session we had a big bill, a lot of work went into it on finding again the proper balance between regulation of someone's property and allowing someone to do what they want to do on their property. And so just quick history, you got farmers who want to clean out their ditches. That way you've got, the water can get away faster, they can get in and plant and harvest and do all the things that they want to do, which I agree with, but then balancing that idea with, when you clean your ditches out or do whatever you do with your ditches, it does impact upstream or downstream your neighbors. And so there's just a balance that has to take place there. I don't know exactly where that is, but we've tried to get at that to allow people the freedom to take care of their own property without terribly negatively impacting the landowner downstream or upstream from them. So again, there's a balancing act that takes place there. Last year, like I said, we had a big bill, maybe one of the most bills I've worked on, in the top 5 certainly since I've been in the legislature, as far as trying to find that right balance. And we did do some deregulation on that bill. It certainly did that as well. But there's nothing that I'm aware of that I've seen, at least not that's come to Natural Resources Committee this go around. Maybe there's a bill, sometimes they'll get put in environmental committee, sometimes they'll get put on utilities or something like that, but or public policy perhaps, but I haven't seen anything this session that deals specifically with that issue in the 2025 session. So. But if somebody's got a question more specifically, or maybe I'm misinterpreting the question, I'm happy to talk to them afterwards. So.
All right. These 2 questions are really similar, so I'm going to combine them together. Could each representative share the number of people they speak with that are in support of the Mid-State Corridor project and the number opposed? And the other question is, could each representative state their position on the Mid-States Corridor?
Yeah, so certainly I speak with more people who are opposed to it. I do speak with people who are in favor of it, and it's not just the big names that you know. There are definitely people who come to me and in the gym, at Walmart, whatever it may be, and say they're in favor of it. From my perspective, since I've been in this office, I view my job with the Mid-States Corridor is to listen to people. I take those voices for or against back to NDOT, back to the governor, and I've done that. It's been 3-4 years ago now. I think it was 2,000 some signatures against directly to then Governor Holcomb, to his office, and gave those to him to make sure that they got to his office. Just to be clear though, we will never vote as House or Senate. We will never vote on the Mid-States Corridor specifically. In fact, Indiana constitutionally prohibited from voting on the Mid-States Corridor as far as, do we want this project or do we not want this project? What we do is at the end of the day, we'll vote on a budget that will include NDOT's funding. It is NDOT who then decides, based off of all the studies that NDOT does, whether they will pursue a project or not pursue a project. So they'll say, we're gonna put money to the Mid-States Corridor, we're gonna put money to Highway 30, whatever it is. But as far as us, like I said, I've simply tried to be a voice for that. But yeah, to answer the first part of the question, it's certainly more vocal against than for.
I don't really have much to add to that because it's the same scenario as me. But I mean, obviously, there's more people against it, but quite a few people that you wouldn't expect are for it for different reasons. But the one thing that we recognize is, I think this is probably one of the hardest parts about the job when you talk about, situations like eminent domain and the government's going to come and take property. I mean, I guess anytime you drop in any road, wherever you're going, it took somebody's property, and it sucks, especially when we're at this point in time. But the one thing we did recognize 3 or 4 years ago is we realized that as Indiana is growing, we're starting to take more land. And the way the statute read, it was not as unfavorable for the citizen, based on the fact that if you have a willing seller and a willing buyer, you can negotiate. But if you have a non-willing seller and somebody that can take it, there needs to be a little bit more fair compensation. But more importantly, maybe it should hurt a little bit so that the person that is, or entity, is that what's willing to take somebody's land would have to really digest the fact that it's going to cost more. So we did pass a law, and we both voted yes on this, to where we'd increase that fair market value to 125%. So if we're going to, and we couldn't find the actual statute. We found the bill we passed, and it was anyway. So I brought it for Shane, but we really said, look, if the government's going to get involved in taking somebody's property, then they've got to pay, and they can't just pay the 100% or just barely fair market value. You're going to have to pay 125%. That's something we did just to try to protect citizens to a little bit more fair when it comes to that situation. So
this is a real tough one for me. If you didn't know my background, I think I said that earlier, but I am a farmer, so I've really struggled with this for a number of years. When it first came out, because there was a potential of going through 3 farms of mine, over the time. Do you fight it? Do you then, or do you work with and try to get an interchange, and have a Buc-ee's on your property and capitalize on that? And I guess I should say this I don't know any other way to do this job than to speak from the heart and be totally honest and transparent. That's the way I'm going to do this. That's why I got involved to do this. So as I think through this, and I've thought through this for a number of years since this all started, where is the balance? I don't know. We can be pro-growth, where we want to just go full speed ahead and incentivize, whether it's through TIFs, abatements, whatever you want to call, and want our area to grow and have multitudes of strip malls and parks, and you guys go when you go to metropolitan areas, name your city, name your big city, and you see all the hustle and bustle. You know, so do we incentivize that, or do we try to not do anything and maintain the lifestyle that we have? I kind of like our little, you know, our little secret. I don't want to tell too many people what we have, because then if everybody knows, then we become that metropolitan area. But on the other hand, if we are anti everything and we don't have any type of steady, measured growth, you know, then we can end up being, you know, pick your rural area that's dying. So there's a balance that needs to be struck, in my opinion. I don't know what that balance is. I'm willing to listen, and I want to support everybody. I guess I don't have a vote in this at this point in what they're saying. My personal opinions, you know, and it's not just this topic. I've thought hard. My personal opinion might not be the most important decision when I'm representing 6 counties. I have to do what people are wanting to do, and this is how you know, this is, I guess, this is maybe, I don't know if you call this a non-answer, but I don't know where to proceed on this. I understand everybody's passion and on both sides. I'm going to, as I go through with this topic or with any other topic, is try to kind of look at slow, measured growth, because if you're not going forward, you're going backward. You know, you can use all the cliches you want. So I guess my story's not written and my answer's not written on these things. So I hope that's not I'm not trying to be a coward. I hope that's not a coward answer, and I apologize. My phone is ringing in my ear because I didn't turn it off. I have hearing aids. So, but anyway, that's kind of where I'm at on that subject. I don't know. I would be happy to talk to each other, you know, to people on that. We just have to watch what we wish for, because that's what we're going to end up getting, if it's one extreme or the other, or if we find a balance somewhere in between.
And I will say, too, I'll add just, so my history with some sort of road improvement goes back to my time on county council. So this is, probably a lot of you know, this has been an issue that's decades, from what I understand. So this isn't just a new topic that's come up in the last few years. So I was also on county council. I don't know if I said that at my intro here, but at that point we had to vote on, it wasn't called Mid-States Corridor at the time. I think it was called I-67, I think it was, and it was really just kind of the bypass around Jasper and Huntingburg. And so, kind of like Daryl, I was Senator Schmitt. I was kind of on the fence, frankly. And so the reason I'm saying this is because I hear at times that this is like a secret thing that's happening. So when I had that opportunity, I see both sides of it as well. And I put out on social media at the time, Facebook, although I was a neophyte at that and didn't do a very good job looking back at that, trying to solicit input. I had one person reply to me, and that was a guy who was for it. And so I say that just to say that, you know, this has been an issue that's been ongoing for quite some time, and it's absolutely a delicate issue. You know, the first section of roads when they came out, the maps rather that came out, one of the westerly routes went, you know, through my property, and so I feel that as, you know, it was a possibility of losing, you know, what started as my grandfather's land and you know, my parents' land. So it's you know, I don't think any of us, absolutely anything that we would take lightly or would do, you know, just willy-nilly without serious thought and serious consideration. So just for what that's worth.
Let me just give you something to write down. If your property is going to be affected by this, it's IC code, IC 32-24-4.5-8. Once again, 32-24-4.5-8. And that's the compensation that raises that rate. So you can refer to that.
And this question might or might not be along with that one. House Bill 1265, authored by Representative Green and co-authored by Representative Culp, will protect Hoosier homestead farms from eminent domain. Will you support this bill, and will you consider being a co-author?
We're going to have to look it up. So here's a little feedback of how things work the first couple of weeks. Generally, as a chairman, we're reading the bills that we have to hear first, we can schedule them. Secondly, we're reading all the bills that are going to be heard in the committees that we also are part of. That's the next step after that, unless you call us, and that's why it's so important to engage with us. We don't track that bill until we see it actually go into a committee that's going to get heard. So, I mean, we're going to, I don't know how many bills we up to, 1,000 something? 1,200. Yeah, 1,200 bills in the House. So, obviously, oh, both sides? Okay, I don't remember how many you have. So, I mean, here's over 1,000 bills. They're obviously not going to get all heard. And so we put our priority to you call us, and we'll start investigating, until that scenario's happened. So 1265. I've not read that bill, so we're kind of looking it up real quick.
All right, there was another question on that, so we'll just combine those two. It's the same, get just your stance on it.
While they're looking at that, I might add that, like in the House, there's 700 some on the Senate sides, you know, so we're trying to work through those and see where we lay on those. I might add, just for you guys, just so you know, I neglected to say this at the beginning. I'm on all the non-controversial committees, so if any of these committees support you, call me, stop afterwards. I'm happy to give everyone my cell phone, but I am on the Education Committee, the Elections Committee, Family and Children Services, Local Government, and Insurance and Financial Institutions. So, and the reason I say that, those basically, as a legislator, as we're going through that, I've learned, those are the ones that we have to prioritize. There's ones that, you know, they're blowing a half a dozen of those different bills through each of those committees on a weekly basis that we have to intimately learn. So, you know, there's normally 9, 11 members on a committee. Those committee members decide and vote to whether or not, if they vote positively, then that bill leaves that committee, then goes to the Senate, you know, for my portion. If it passes through the Senate, then it jumps to the House side. So the opposite then happens over here on the House side. If it comes out of their committees, then it goes to the full House, makes it out of the House, it goes to the Senate. Then once it passes both of those, then it's where it goes to the governor's office for his signature. And if he votes no, then it goes back to the House and the Senate for 2/3 vote to override a veto, and it goes. And I know I'm probably duplicating that for a lot of you people, but you figured out 1265?
Yeah, I mean, on its surface, it seems reasonable. I'm actually trying to, so if you've ever read a bill, there's a synopsis and it kind of gives you an overview, but until you read the words, you've got to understand that the law really is changing sometime with what they paraphrase what the bill is. It seems reasonable. Whoever answered that or asked that question, take my card, I'll look into it for me, and you can call me back or give me your information, I'll call you. So, since I have not had any time to really look at it, but good question.
Okay, here's kind of more of a comment, I guess, and I'll just say it's from Ken Sicard. He's with the town of Ferdinand. As a property owner, I understand the excitement of property tax reduction. As a member of the Ferdinand Town Council, I also know that property taxes are what our town services depend on. If property taxes are reduced, cities and towns need something to replace these funds. Otherwise, our principal services will be affected. Police, fire, ambulance are examples. Just want you to be aware of this as the tax changes are discussed.
Yeah, I thank you for that, Ken. For what it's worth, I know that the people working on those committees fully understand that and are working. You know, like we've talked several times up here this morning, there's a balance in there somewhere. I don't know exactly where it is, and probably not everybody's going to be happy at the end of the day on what balance is struck. But I know that they are trying to find that balance between making sure we maintain our local units and allowing them to do the important things that they do need to do, but also providing that tax relief. So I 100% agree with you. I can just tell you, reassure you for what it's worth, that they are aware of that, and they're definitely taking those things into consideration. We've all been on local government. There is a significant number, I don't know about the Senate, but I know in the House that come from local government. A lot of county council, Steve and I, commissioners, we've got township folks, we've got city council folks. I mean, so there's a broad respect for local governments on the House side. Again, not to diminish the Senate side, I just don't know what's on the Senate side. So anyway, there's broad respect for that. So
you see the eagerness of the new senator?
Well, I I don't have all the, and this is a good point, I get impatient because legislative time and normal time are not always the same things. And I have to figure out that, and we're not politicians, we're local people representing you, but sometimes we get a little long-winded. And so I thought he was done 3 times there, so, but, you know it's not. I love these guys, right? We're all in this together, so I apologize if that was a shot at you, sorry. But I'm also long-winded, so that's not a problem. And the people that know me that are on the county council that know me that I'm that way. But anyway, here's my thought and take and what I'm going to do and what I've already been talking to leadership about is I'm all about what I said earlier in here, driving decisions local, okay? So I'm concerned about the loss of property taxes and the revenue that it will be, okay? So what I heard from leadership, well, there's $5-point-some-odd billion of unused local income taxes that we can use as local counties to replace that. So what I've told them, I said, now, we have to watch what we wish for and we can't overreact. This is me, this is Daryl, the public citizen, farmer, previous county councilor that's been a senator for 4 months. I said we have to make sure we don't overdo reductions on property taxes. We need to lower and address, but we don't want to overreact, you know, to any one thing and make a fundamental shift of where the taxes are collected, whether it's property or income. So, but I like the concept of ultimately getting decisions more to the local level. I feel that we can make decisions better at the local level. So, this is my opinion. If there's property tax reductions, that's a local unit of government. We're going to have to look at, okay, are there things that we're doing that we maybe don't need to, needs versus wants? But then, if there's shortfalls, then it gives us the opportunity as local units of government to then create, you know, I guess creating a tax is not a good way to say that, because I'm never for raising taxes, but if we're taking it from property and we're adjusting it over here to local income taxes, we're driving decisions more to the local level where we can make decisions on ourselves, which I think we can make a better decision for ourselves. And I don't care if we're talking healthcare and, you know, patients and doctors or teachers and parents, you know, anything that we can do as local elected officials then to enact change, to be held more accountable. It'll be a double-edged sword because as local officials, we're going to be more accountable too, right? If we're the ones that we're wanting to do that, so it'll be more representative because if we do something that's not like, well then okay, then 4 years down the road we can be unelected, you know. But it'll encourage us to represent our people more, but our people then are going to be free, have to be free to talk to us, and it's going to be harder, but I think it'll be better. Those are the focuses. I'm a freshman legislator, so I'm not necessarily in all the you know, the high level end conversation. But that's basically what I'm telling them is, you know, we have to watch so there's not a fundamental shift, and we have to enable us to do it locally. And as long as we don't have any unintended consequences and overreact, I think ultimately it's a good thing. We can make this a good thing.
All right, continuing on that, regarding Senate Bill 1, local property taxes impacting local governments, can we get a hard look at the negative impacts that TIF has had and continues to have on local taxpayers? Senate Bill 1 increases revenue for TIF as it is in current form according to the LSA.
That's another easy one. A lot of these things happen in summer interim study committees. These issues are studied. And as they progress through, then legislation's developed in the fall is what we're going through now. I think there have been, this is my personal opinion, there have been unintended consequences of TIFs are not always used the way that I believe that they were intended to be used. I personally think that they can be great. They can be awesome tools but we have to watch how they were using, and they need to be tweaked. I think we have to come with more firm end dates where things can't go on in perpetuity. I think that's how you say that. I wasn't an English major. So there is awareness at the state level that we need to look at those to make sure that those are being used right. I guess that's the best answer I can give you at this point, and that is a priority of mine, to make sure they're used. They're good tools if used correctly.
All right, now we're going to move on now to education. Increase to new teacher salary. What processes will also increase veteran teacher pay? And if all focus is on new teachers, what will reduce the burnout and keep the veteran teachers? Maybe.
Yeah, I guess I don't quite understand the question, but what we did as a state say this has got to be the minimum teacher salary. And what you're seeing is, at least the corporation in my district, have done the pay raises based on that. So they understand they can't take a new teacher at 60 grand and have a tenured teacher at 60. And so a lot of schools are using stipends as an option to, it's like, look, we can't promise it based on how the revenue's going to come in. But we're seeing that, I really haven't heard this as an issue in my district. I mean, I think the superintendents are really take care of their teachers the best they can. I don't think there's a lot of hidden money in corporations. I don't think the schools that I go and visit and see are intentionally trying to pay the teachers the lowest they can. I've never seen that as an intent of his administration. So I think that may happen elsewhere. You know, I know there's some issues in like Indianapolis, but at least down here, I mean, I've always seen the superintendents and the school board doing bargaining and fair, and they're doing everything they can. So.
Yeah, I don't know that I 100% understand the question. I know that I had some stats pulled before the meeting. In 2024, the average salary for teachers in the state of Indiana for public school was $60,557. So, you know, that's above where we put the minimum to begin with. So, you know, I know we'll continue to look at the issue. Again, happy, if we missed the underlying premise of the question, happy to talk to whoever afterwards. So.
Basically, just how to keep the veteran teachers' pay also incrementing higher so that we don't get burnout, and then they see the new teachers making similar salaries.
So thank you for that. So I think that one thing I hear from teachers when I talk to them is the regulations and the other stuff that comes on. So that's why I mentioned House Bill 1002 at the start. I think that I'm excited about that. Again, a lot of well-intentioned issues that come before the legislature that I think, again, have good reasoning behind them, good intentions behind them, but at the end of the day, create more burden for the local schools. Sometimes they have to hire, the schools will have to hire, you know, somebody to administer that or handle that, right? So hopefully this 1002, because again, what I hear from teachers a lot is, I just want to teach, and I don't want to do all this other stuff. And so that's, you know, I think what 1002 is trying to get at. Will it get there perfectly? You know, my guess is it's not going to get there perfectly, but you know, hopefully we can approach that, which will, I think, maybe get to that first part of the question, or whatever part of the question it was, that, you know, to help keep teachers there and reduce the burnout that teachers have been experiencing, who've been there for, you know, a while.
So kind of in that same vein, on the social worker bill, if funding is increasing from 62% to 65%, wouldn't that 3% go to the social worker counselors rather than to existing teachers?
Let me clarify what the intent, what 62 and 65% does. All it does is say is the revenue that you bring in, 65% has to be used for compensation of teachers. So what this is right now is it's 62%, it's going to 65. So whatever the school board and the superintendent has for teachers, as long as all the teachers fill in 62% or more, 65, it's going to pass. All we're saying is if you have a social worker there, which a lot of them have a social worker or a psychologist, that their staff, that salary compensation will help them reach that goal of 65% of compensation. Does that make more sense? So it doesn't really change the pay, doesn't decrease. All it is currently the school corporations are paying for these people, whether it's a contract or an individual. And so all we're saying is if we're going to raise it to 65, these are the people that are important, and the teachers want these folks, administrators want these folks. And so the benefit should be to encourage corporations to have these mental health professionals in their schools is at least allow their compensation to be part of that package and meet the goal that the state has put on them. So that's the intent of it. It doesn't really change any of the funding or take away any money from teachers.
All right, concerning Senate Bill 146, the handout that you have, states eliminate barriers. What are the barriers? What are these barriers to become a teacher? There must be some of the wording on your handout.
I guess I'm not sure where that is. Well, they're trying to incentivize people to become teachers. There's a distinct shortage in teachers right now. So just in multiples of ways to try to encourage young kids coming out of college, you know, to be involved. There's a education committee was Wednesday afternoon. There is another separate bill that I think there's a crisis. I think there's 1,200 unfilled teaching positions. And we're ending up with a lot of teachers that they're having to put people in positions that they didn't go to school for. You know, didn't get, you know, haven't got the right certifications. I guess the local school boards have to file for emergency. Someone in here, if you're in the school corporation, help me out because I'm not 100% understanding all of these things. But anyway, the crisis is they're having to ask for emergency exemptions to have people that necessarily weren't trained to teach, you know, English, having to get in there. So I know there's legislation going on to try to, you know, through Purdue University is one where they're trying to create different, I guess, and quicker programs to get people up to speed because there's such an emergency need. So there's multiple barriers and why people don't want to get in. You know, they can be, you know, different social issues, whatever. You name it, there's a lot of barriers to get in. So I apologize, I'm not necessarily answering your question. But there are a lot of things that people are trying to do in the Senate to incentivize and make it more appealing for teachers to get involved. And because our teachers, you know, we can have all these questions about education and things that we think are wrong, but ultimately the kids are the most important, and the teachers are the most important resource that these school corporations have. So we're trying to figure out ways to, you know, to encourage teachers to be involved. So I hope that helps.
Now,
If not,
I'm going to switch. Sorry, Kate, we have like a whole lot of questions here. Okay, this is the difference between public, charter, and private schools. And then two other questions are, would you support accountability measures for school vouchers similar to the accountability public schools must follow? And then another kind of a comment question. Public school funds are typically accounted for. Meanwhile, $2 billion in funds for some charter schools that vanish without accounting for them, yet we are asking for another $1 billion. How is that accountability? So basically it's asking for the accountability, not just for public schools, but for the money going to school vouchers. And then what is the difference between a public, charter, and private school? And why is the household income level over $200,000 for participation in the school choice voucher program? And why should public money fund these higher income earners? So it's all about the vouchers, the charter, public versus private schools, and accountability.
Okay. Could I have that? And I'll start answering the multiple questions in here as best I can. Well, first, I want to make sure everybody realizes if you look at my voting record, I don't vote with my colleagues in the House when it comes to public education. Right? We don't, in Southern Indiana, we do not have the problems of the big cities and the municipalities, right? So it's less significant. So therefore, it's easy for me to vote against a lot of these policies that would incur a lot more regulation or more reporting or those kind of things on traditional public schools. Charter schools, there was a question about the differences. They're really all the same. There's some reporting requirements that are different, and if you notice, I've always voted against that. I'm for school choice. I have no problem with that. I think it's great. I think that's a fundamental part of what we need as parents and the freedom to send our kids there. The reason why we don't have charter schools, brick and mortar charter schools in Southern Indiana is because we have great public schools, traditional public schools. So we're not going to have that issue. Now, if our public education starts going down the tank, you may see a charter school interested in coming in and do something about that. But pretty much I think in my lifetime we're not going to have this issue, at least in Southern Indiana. But charter schools do play an important role in our education. Pretty much every one of our corporations uses a charter school of some sort for an online class, whether it's a child that's sick and at home can't come in, some disciplinary issues, they use the charter school system. So we're not abandoning these kids just because they're not in the school. So I'm pretty sure, I can't think of any school corporation that hasn't used some of that kind of charter school stuff. You want to go in between it or read the accountability?
Yeah, so I think on the accountability part, there is absolutely accountability. Number one, so let me back up from that. So I think that the fundamental premise of Indiana's approach to public education, or K through 12 education, I should say, has been a few points. It's parents should have the right to send their kids to whatever schooling, whatever institution they feel like is best. So we've taken the approach in Indiana that if you feel like your kid is better served in some charter school, you should have that right as a parent. If you feel they would be better served in the traditional, you have that right. If you feel, you can even move. In fact, most of the moves from school to school are from public to public. I don't remember the percentages right now, but it's the vast majority would be from Huntingburg to Jasper, Jasper to Huntingburg, Ferdinand, whatever it would be. Those are the vast majority of the moves as far as those take place. So parents have the right to send their kids where they feel like their kid would learn best. For me, for instance, I had my kids in 2 different schools at one point because I felt they accommodated my kids better. One school was a better fit, the other school was a better fit for my other kid. So we've availed ourselves of that choice. As far as, and so with that, I think the first part of accountability comes in me as a parent. It's my kid. I'm responsible primarily for educating my kid, and if I see the school not doing what I want them to do, that's the first part of accountability, and that should be on all of us as citizens and as parents to do that. There is accountability for private schools and for charter schools. Charter schools are actually public schools as well. They just have, I think part of the question was, what's the difference? They just have specific, I do have a brick and mortar charter school in the district that I represent in Otwell Miller Academy. So they just have a specific focus rather than just the broad K through 12 focus. I guess that's kind of in a nutshell how I would describe a charter school for these purposes. So I'm all over the board here, I apologize, but the parents have the choice. The money follows the student in Indiana. And so there was a time prior to these changes where we were funding buildings as a state, and there was a huge discrepancy from school system to school system to school system as far as how much funds were allocated to those buildings. You have some school systems that had very low population and still receiving a huge allocation percentage-wise. Now what we're doing is there's still some discrepancy there, don't get me wrong, you're never going to completely get rid of that discrepancy, and part of the discrepancy is built into the funding model for K through 12 education, but it's much more uniform across the board. So if you've got a kid that goes, and this is, I'm oversimplifying here, but if you've got a kid that goes from Jasper to Huntingburg, that money that's allocated from the state is going to stay with that kid. So again, we're funding kids, we're not funding buildings. And then we are rewarding schools that perform well, because part of the funding mechanism, if you've got honor students and things like that, you get a little bit more funding. It's part of the complexity index that funnels into the funding system for the state. If you've got a lot of kids who struggle, whether they're not English speaking other than English speaking, if you've got kids, disabled kids, things like that, where you've got some other challenges, additional challenges, kids that struggle learning, kids that are on SNAP or TANF or any of those things, there's additional money that goes with those kids as well. So I've had the question, why is there, there's so much money per student at this school and there's less money per student at this school? Well, there's a formula for it, and it's predicated off of the things I just kind of briefly ran through. But again, as far as the accountability portion, I mean, if the state, to receive the voucher, for instance, they have to take standardized testing. There are measures that they have to follow. They can't disallow students to come in, so they can't just pick and choose which student they're going to allow. And if they're going to take state money, there are strings attached, trust me. And so, like I said, one of my kids was going to a private school, one was going to a public school, and there are absolutely strings attached. As far as the, allowing for higher income earners, to me, it's just, maybe you disagree with this, but I think every parent should have the choice. It shouldn't just be, parents with lower incomes. I think every parent should have the choice to send their kid where they want. There's actually a Indiana Supreme Court case that backed this up, that we can use our tax money to send our kids where we want them to go. So, happy to talk further about that too as well.
One more question on this list is, what is your stance on collective bargaining?
I don't know a whole lot about collective bargaining. I think that, so we're talking about the whole union issue here. I have a distinction between a public union and a private union. I think private unions, are, well, let me do it the other way. I think public unions are different because they're funded, at the end of the day by, taxpayer money at the end of the day, because the teachers' dues go to fund those unions. And so when you've got a public union like that, it gets complicated really quickly. Collective bargaining is not something I've really been a part of or partaken in. I don't know if either one of these gentlemen have, but I know like I said, I don't want to say too much because I just don't know a whole lot about it. I'm largely ignorant on it, but.
So real quick on collective bargaining. So does everybody know Veronica Hobbs? Yeah, so, we get along really well, and she feeds me back. And there's a few things that her and I disagree on. I think collective bargaining in Southern Indiana does fine. I think there's a trust and relationship between the board and superintendent that they realize they're not holding all their cards right now. I do understand it has to be like a used car sales for some deal, right? You got to go talk to the manager, come back, it's like, we can go about this, and you're not going to get the floor mats. But all in all, at least in my district, I can speak intelligently from talking to all my superintendents and the Uniserv director that it's done in good faith, and generally it goes in the right direction. So I don't have those issues. The only issue that I push back on ISTA on is I think they should have non-union members part of that process and go in with them. I think they should, if you don't know this about me, I was a union guy. I started a union and actually unionized an employer, so it's an interesting concept. But the one thing that I recognized back then is you want non-union members to participate or they'll never be members. So I always encourage them to let them be involved. Of course, in the ISTA it's a little bit, no, maybe not. But other than that, at least in Southern Indiana, we do not have a big issue, and I think collective bargaining works well here. It does not work well across the state. So it's kind of one of those things where, once again, I'm always supportive of traditional public schools in my district because we don't have those issues and problems.
I would echo that. I have 14 public schools, different school corporations in the 6 counties that I represent, and 1 charter school, which is the one at Otwell. And from talking to superintendents around here, they say the same thing. They don't have the issues. Everybody works and is in good faith. And our representation as far as percentage of teachers that are in union are high here. A lot of different parts of the state, it's not. I think the statistic is 58% of teachers across the state of Indiana are members of the union. So why, when you hear this stuff at the state level, it's because there's some places it's not working, okay? So there, I can do that math. That means 42% are not participants in the process, and they don't have their voice heard. So that's where you hear the clamoring. But us locally in our area, it's not been an issue, and people work together well, which is the way it should be.
Okay, again, there are a lot of questions, and truthfully, we may not get to all of them because our time is running toward the end. But Representative Bartels is a member of the Courts and Criminal Code Committee. What are your thoughts about House Bill 1030, repealing of the death penalty?
I'm against it. I don't think there's any need. I know that there is, you know, I look at it this way, and there was a decision that was made by the individual that is incarcerated, and sometimes that comes with consequences of death. And Indiana does not do this like haphazardly, nor do we do it very often, right? So a lot of times people mix up if somebody is subject to the death penalty. It's not the same as Terre Haute, right? That's federal. And it happens in Indiana, but it's not us as a state. It's a rare occurrence, and I think it's a, you know, it's part of that issue to where if we can have some kind of deterrent, I think unfortunately and I would say this to any judge and as a retired cop and part of this committee, the biggest thing we see is the courts system is once again a used car deal, right? I mean, the prosecutors and the defense counsel goes up and they negotiate all this stuff, and everybody's always asking us to increase the penalties. Well, the problem is we just don't enforce the current laws. And so once we get back to doing that, and if they qualify for the death penalty, you know, I say, look, it's sometimes there's a consequence.
Okay, Representative Lindauer, last year you authored a bill protecting PFAS chemicals, and I know we talked about it here at one of the sessions, from being banned. It did not get a hearing. Are there any bills this year regarding PFAS chemicals, and what are those bills?
So, I'm not sure about it. It got a hearing last year. It actually passed out of the House last year. The Senate did not pass it last year. I don't have one again in the Senate, or I'm sorry, in the House. I think there's one on the Senate side. The reasoning was you know, if it's not going to pass out of the Senate, there's no reason to try to take it through the House. So, which is not uncommon with a bill, with an issue like this. So, sorry, let me. I think that it's not from being banned. It's not from being banned. The bill was a recognition that PFAS literally is thousands of chemistries. PFAS is not one thing. And PFAS is used, it's polyfluoroalkyl substances is PFAS. So it's the acronym. They are used in thousands of applications. You have this in your PFAS in your inhaler. If anybody's asthmatic, your inhaler, you're injecting PFAS as part of the formulation into your lungs. It's in our medical devices, and pacemakers. It's in the industries all over use PFAS. And again, it's because there's thousands and thousands of chemistries that incorporate PFAS. So what the bill was a recognition, and even on the House side in committee, there were several scientists that testified, some for, some against. Even the scientists that were against, one from Purdue and one from Notre Dame, I think, acknowledged that there are different PFASs, right? They're not all the same. Some are safer than others. And so what we were trying to do as a state is to create a regulatory certainty in Indiana for companies like our defense industries, like our medical device manufacturers, that these PFAS products, or these PFAS chemistries rather, are safer. And I'm not here to say that all of them are perfectly safe, right? That's not what I'm trying to say. But there are certain chemistries that are safer than other chemistries. And so the idea was to say most of these are banned ready. You know, so again, it wasn't saying that they can't be banned. And you know, even the outgoing administration, the Biden administration, they had within the federal government 3 different definitions of PFAS, which, as you might imagine, creates some confusion, which PFAS that can be regulated. So we were trying to say, in Indiana, these are the PFAS that we want to regulate because we know these are pretty dangerous, you know, and we also know that we've got alternatives to those that we can use that are safer. So the House or the Senate, I'm not sure, frankly, I haven't followed up with it. I don't know if it's moving in the Senate. I don't know if Senator Schmitt's heard.
I'm not sure on that one.
If it just, you know, if it comes back to the House, if it's, you know, similar as we were last year, or relatively similar, I would support it again in all likelihood. So.
Okay, another question. House Bill 1173 proposes to block minority students from receiving scholarships if they mention race. Many of these awards are privately funded but administered by public universities. They also are often merit-based. Are you in favor of a bill that might limit disadvantaged students from being able to afford college?
First off, this is another example where being in the second week, I doubt if that would get any momentum, so I'd have to read it. I don't know if anybody's seen, it's not come across our radar because I doubt if it gets a hearing, but I guess this is something that when we have a meeting, we'll follow up, and because it's really, I'll have to read the bill. It's not sure what the intent of the author is.
Okay, and then Senator Schmitt, you have introduced Senate Bill 469 regarding assessment of land used for power generation. Can you share more detail about the intent of this bill?
Yes, the intent of this is in Indiana, you have a solar land base rate, which that's what, when a project is solar farm, solar array, whatever you want to call it, there is the assessed valuation then on that property. As these were being developed, there was no uniformity between assessors in the state. So what was developed was a formula to come up with a median true tax value based off of Class 800 codes, which are utility codes in the state of Indiana. And the state was broken into a northern, central, and southern region. And then that would be the standard assessed value, solar land base rate used. Well, over the last 5 years, as you know, and as I was on the county council, I noticed that the northern and the central sections, the AV was roughly, you know, $12,000 to $14,000. Well, the southern third of the state was anywhere from $4,500, and now the latest was $7,700 on the assessed value. So, and typically those are paid by the solar companies, you know, that are doing the projects. So I was trying to basically have the southern third of the state more uniform like the rest of the state, you know. Same solar array, basically, same process in any part of the state you're in. And if you look at models, solar radiation in southwestern Indiana is higher than the rest, so typically you would think that it would be more valuable instead of half the cost. So I was just working to make that uniform, so if that's more uniform and representative, then it would be, I guess, and it's minor, but it would be a net increase for property taxes in proportion for the solar projects. But then that would ultimately, then the people, the rest of the ratepayers, if you're going to raise the assessed valuation on that project, that lowers the tax rate, and then the rest of the taxpayers are going to pay, you know, a little bit smaller rate. So I was just trying to make it uniform and equitable across the state. Seemed logical to me.
Okay, so there's a couple more questions, but we'll just go with two more and then kind of a comment. So what percentage of the motor vehicle excise tax goes to Indiana schools? And what percentage of the motor vehicle excise tax goes to rural county road funding?
Whoever this is, come down, we can find out. Get my cell phone number.
Okay, that's a good way to handle that.
Yeah, the only thing I do want to say, especially for the public and anybody elected officials, there is a push for road funding for locals to tie into their LITs. So we're going to, the state's concept, if you're not maxed out on whatever local taxes you can impose, it's going to be tied into community crossroad grants and other grants. So start being aware that when you look at the tax code, that if your county is able to charge 5% or something like that, if you're not at max, you could potentially lose maximum on community crossroad grants and other grants. It's a concept that's going to be probably kicked around this year. So just food for thought.
And I know Steve has said it, just to reiterate, I'm happy to share my cell phone number too. If we've misinterpreted questions, if you want more specific information on any of these bills, give us a call. I mean, I'm happy to sit down with you. I'm typically home on, when we're in session on Fridays. I'll sit and meet with anybody as long as we can do it respectfully to talk through issues. So happy to do so. So I just wanted to say that. So afterwards, let me know. All three of us now have said we're happy to give our cell phones. So.
All right, and there are several questions pertaining certain bills. So what I encourage you to do, we didn't get to all these and our time's kind of up, please follow these bills that you're concerned about. And they may never even get a hearing, they may never get anything. So, but follow them and contact the legislators, which kind of leads to this last kind of a question comment. I am a person who believes that most citizens want to accomplish the same ends to present day issues. How could we establish a way to dialogue with our legislators? So I think that's what they just said. They're willing to share their cell phone numbers. You can follow things. They can probably tell you what are some websites to follow some of these bills. So do that, and I am excited about all these questions that were asked today. Thank you, everyone, for turning in your questions, and thank you, everyone, for attending. And also, let's thank our state legislators for being here today. All right, we'll bring this to an end, and again, have a great weekend and be careful.
Just as a reminder, please fill out your surveys and contact us. We really do read those and use that for our voting.